In 1978, DC Comics, desperate to stop the juggernaut Marvel Comics had become and retake their position as the dominant publisher in comics, gambled it all on what they called the DC Explosion, a publishing initiative that would see DC debut a wealth of new titles, increase the price of comics, and widen their scope to publish stories with newer, more diverse characters. This strategy failed catastrophically, leading to what would become known as the DC Implosion. What caused the DC Implosion? It's been attributed to everything from poor ideas from editorial to good ideas from editorial that came too soon, price increases, one of the worst blizzards in the history of the United States, a paper shortage, panicked executives, a film delay, and just plain old bad books. It's a whodunit's worth of possibilities, but by the end of this series, you'll understand how each of those things contributed to one of DC's darkest hours. You'll also learn about arguably the most important woman ever in comics, who shaped the future of the industry with her actions and saved DC Comics. This is the history of the DC Comics Explosion, Part 1, Before the Explosion.
All of those things you listed, you could have said that exact list without all of the pretense. It sounded like it could have happened. You could have been talking about last year.
Like a year after New 52 even.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I was thinking of.
So I love that you said that, Kale. I love that those are the first words not spoken by me, because that is a heavy, heavy theme of this deep dive that we're going to do. And it's a big part of why I chose this topic, because the cyclical nature of the problems in comics is remarkable, and it's never been clearer to me than since I've been doing research for this subject matter. Hello, everyone watching us live. Hello, everyone not watching us or listening to us live. Welcome. Thank you for joining. If you're a fan of comics and you understand the industry, which you come to know just by, being into it for a while, you know that there are certain problems and certain things that come up over and over again. And when I first started researching what we would do after Twilight of the Superheroes, a lot of people recommended the DC Explosion. And I didn't know why. I didn't know what it was. And now that I've learned, I can see how incredibly predictive of the future the events of just really a few, most people say a few short months, but I go back to, most people think it all started in 78, but our story is starting in 76, because I think that's an important year in DC's history. I think it's an important year in comics, and we're going to talk about why. But the problems that DC had in 76 are the same problems it has in 2023. It's actually incredible. So this is what we're going to be tackling for the next few weeks. Go ahead.
When you announced the DC Explosion, I was like, "Yo, did I miss a terrorist attack again?" Like, Jesus Christ, what happened?
That's why I included DC Comics.
Okay.
Explosion.
Well, you know what? I have selective hearing.
Because if you type DC Explosion without comics, it's something very different. So, as we get into this, I want to shout out the book, Comic Book Implosion, an oral history of DC Comics circa 1978 by Keith Dallas and John Wells, and 13thdimension.com, because they did great work serializing the book. This is a book that is out of print, but it is available digitally. It's a great book, and if you're curious about this subject matter, frankly, you're probably going to get most of what you need to get out of the subject from this. But if you want more, you can read the book, and it does have a lot of great interviews and things like that. Some of which we'll be referencing, most of which we're getting just from, people love to talk back then. So there's a lot of material for us to dive into. but it's a fascinating time in DC. Classic Ulysses says 1978. That's when Superman the movie came out. Why? Thank you for bringing that up. You'll hear about that again very soon.
Oh, interesting.
Okay, so our story starts with Marvel. Because by 1976, which is considered to be still in the mix of the Bronze Age, Marvel had already overtaken DC in market share. Marvel had a sell-through rate of 70% to DC's 50%. Now, for those of you not sure what a sell-through rate is, that is what it references is the amount of, in this case, comics, but in general, merchandise that is sold to actual consumers.
Sure. So that's comic shops buying it, and 70% of the things they bought actually were purchased. Is that right?
So, in this case, comic book shops are still relatively
Sure. Newsstands.
and they have a different system. So, when we are talking about sell-through in this case, we're mostly talking about everything else. Places with returnability. And I'll speak more to that a little bit later. But just so you guys know, returnability didn't exist. Newsstands, grocery stores, all that, they mix, and whatever they got, returnability was all that existed. My apologies. They got what they got, and if they didn't sell it, they sent it back. So what I'm saying is that with a 50% sell-through rate, DC was barely making money because 50% of the books that they were shipping were getting sent back to them. Whereas Marvel was selling through 70% of their books. So Marvel was kicking DC's ass. And DC was trying to figure out why and what to do about it. And they had all kinds of wonky ideas about the reason. They thought it was because of the use of the color red that Marvel was doing tremendously. They had
Amazing.
wild ideas about why Marvel was doing so well. And it's funny because Stan Lee actually had fun with that. He thought that that was a very funny idea. And so he would do things in the books that would counter whatever he heard DC thought was really the reason why Marvel was doing so well. He would do something different just to fuck with them.
Amazing.
And it's not really a rivalry. Like it's a spirited rivalry. It's not a war.
Both these places, both their headquarters were in New York at the time, right? So
Yeah.
so they would have lunch with each other, you know?
The workers and everybody. Go ahead.
This would have been back in the days of the baseball games.
Yeah. The relationship was definitely a lot warmer, I guess you could say, than it would become. A few years later, we got Batman versus Hulk in 1981. So this is around the time where they were happy to do business with each other.
I did not know Batman versus Hulk was a thing. That is good to know.
That's one of the many things that I learned throughout this process. DC's books hadn't been connecting the way Marvel's were. Marvel skewed older, and they were bolder. They were the ones that broke the comics code several times. But by introducing a drug storyline with Harry Osborn, they broke the comics code. And then the comics code changed to accommodate Marvel storytelling, because if they didn't do that, then the code would be null and void and no one else would follow it. And then DC did their drug storyline in Green Arrow, I think it was.
Speedy,
yes.
Speedy doing speed.
Yep. So DC needed to do something different. DC needed to try something else. They decided that they would publish more books because they thought that that was one of the factors to Marvel's big success, would be publishing even more comics. But they ultimately hired Jeanette Khan.
yes, I knew it. Okay, cool.
Look at Marco, who became publisher of DC, on February 2nd, 1976, at 28 years old.
Damn,
If you can believe that.
What? That is wild.
I have
Yeah.
wasted my life.
Should have gotten to editing.
She was notable at the time for having launched 2 publications prior, Kids and Dynamite. She came into the role of publisher swinging and punching right up because her first battle was actually against the top heads of Warner Brothers, who wanted to license the rights to publish stories featuring DC's characters away and fold the publishing division and only do reprints.
What? That's fucking wild.
We have talked about the exact same idea this year. This year. That was a real fear that we had, and frankly, I still have, when the deal with Discovery went down. That they might not see the value in publishing weekly comics. So even as far back as 1976, Jeanette Khan steps into the role and immediately has to fight for DC's existence. So that's the climate we're in. DC's overlords don't think that DC is worth the money. But there is something coming that might make them think differently, which, of course, is Superman the movie. So everybody's holding on to the idea of Superman the movie changing the game. But Jeanette Khan is not happy to wait because she has ideas of her own. So I'm going to refer to her for the first time here. And we're going to do that a lot because Jeanette Khan is a person that a lot of people don't know of, but they should. And you're going to understand why as we get through this process. So this is an interview with Jeanette, who was then DC Comics publisher. She did an interview in back issue number 57 in July of 2012. Bill, this is a quote from her. Bill, her boss at the time, said, "We have 4 decades worth of comics, hundreds of titles, and we're thinking we should reprint them since those comics lose money, and we make all our profits through merchandise and media." And she said, quote, "That's a really terrible idea." I said, "Oh, the chutzpah of youth. It's the ongoing exploits and new adventures of the characters that are the lifeblood of the company and make licensing and media possible. If you don't publish new stories, the characters will have a radioactive half-life, and eventually all the media and merchandise will disappear." Isn't it funny that somebody who just stepped into the position at 28 years old understood that in 1976? People today don't get it.
Yes, I would be curious, and this might just be me thinking too worldly, but like that's the European model for Tintin and Asterix, and they sell insane numbers in the millions every year. So I would be curious to know, like, if any like research had been done for that stuff over there. I can't imagine. But
if modern comic books and not learning anything from manga is, they're not looking elsewhere, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
So, that is an interesting point. I highly doubt it. I think they were looking at the bottom line and saying, these books, we're getting our asses kicked by the new upstart. Like, what are we doing wrong?
Yeah.
And I think that was the climate at DC, was trying to solve the problem and stop the bleeding. And, Jeanette, she grew up reading DC Comics. So to her, and not just DC Comics, she grew up reading a lot of other comics. Because, of course, we're talking about a time where there was a lot of stuff out there. And one of the things that I've been so fascinated by is the diverse publishing line that DC especially, but also even Marvel had. But we'll refer back to that. Jeanette believed that comics could be better. She thought that DC had the potential to tell the best stories in comics. And she thought that they could do that with a higher quality of storytelling, better paper stock, longer stories in the actual floppies themselves, and etc. Now I'm going to read a quote from another magazine that Jeanette spoke to, or rather, this was actually from the books themselves. This was the first time that comic book readers from DC heard directly from Jeanette Khan in December of '76, and so this is what she said. It's a funny, cute little message. When you've got just one comic and a lot of time to kill, what is the only thing you can do? Right, read the comic again. But supposing you've read it, not just twice, but 3 times, decided who wrote the jerkiest letter on the letters page, and spent at least 3 minutes wondering if those X-ray specs really work, and if so, why haven't you sent them away already? What then? Well, in desperation, you might turn again to the beginning and read the old familiar names in tiny type at the bottom of page 1. Sol Harrison, Jack Adler. Yep, it's the same old DC. But wait, wasn't Sol vice president before? It says president now. And Jack's vice president. And Joe Orlando's not just an editor. He's a managing editor. And Vince Coletta's art director. And Paul Levitz is some impressive sounding thing called editorial coordinator. Even a dingbat of modest intelligence can tell some kind of change is going on. A more astute dingbat might notice something else. One of the old familiar names is nowhere to be found. And there, in its place, is a new name, never before seen in comics, Jeanette Khan. All signs seem to indicate that an unknown person of presumably female persuasion has become publisher of DC. The inevitable questions arise. Who is she anyway? Does she have the necessary qualifications to be the publisher of the largest comic company in the world? Can she type? Yes, I can. 10 words a minute using 2 fingers. I also started 3 magazines, which, strange to say, you might well be hoarding right next to your most prized comics. I'm going to stop there because you can get an impression of who Jeanette is with what I just read. Sassy, spunky, and ready to take on the world.
Kind of no bullshit. Realizes she's getting into a boys' club.
No,
and is curbing that shit at the door.
And she's ready.
Yeah.
Damn, that's
she's
crazy.
ready.
She came on with fucking boxing gloves.
Yep. Because she knew the climate and the environment that she would be jumping into. And Jeanette is... Go ahead, Kale.
I was gonna say, was this lady still alive when Heather Antos went through the milkshake bullshit?
She's alive now.
Oh, I hope she gave Heather a call.
By the way, if you guys are enjoying this presentation so far, please do hit that like button if you're so inclined. Thank you, everybody that's joining. I see the chat between me referring to my script, so thank you all. Glad to see Dan and Atomic Hound here, especially because you guys are of the age where you've probably read some of this stuff, and you probably can speak to some of this stuff. So
outing them.
Well, I'd be proud, man. I really the more I dig into this old stuff, the more I wish that I had been around. And I think it's cool that there were people that that are still here that can speak to all this.
Yeah,
still here.
Comic book history is very fun, and there's a lot of good books about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So she quickly found an ally in Paul Levitz, a man who, of course, would go on to become president of DC and have a legendary career in his own right, but here was only 21 years old, if you can believe that. So we're talking about a very fresh-faced Paul Levitz.
Sean, do you mind if we just got a super chat from Joel? I just wanted to read it real quick.
Yes, please.
Joel said, I just wanted to say good morning. You guys are awesome. This is for the research that you had to do for the topic. So,
thank you so much, Joel. I really, really appreciate that. Good morning to you, and I hope that you enjoy this presentation. You guys make this possible, so I really appreciate that. That's so cool of you to do. So both of them saw the dire state of comics and were desperate to save the medium, swiftly making changes that immediately improved business and morale. One of those was the introduction of the Dollar Comics Initiative.
Almost feels like Walmart comics. You know what I mean? Like,
the parallels are literally everywhere.
Yeah,
they're all over the map. And I thought the Dollar Comics thing was so funny because, like, Now that would obviously be 99 cents, right? Like it would not be $1.
Sure, yeah.
No,
Yeah.
it wouldn't be close.
Off the dollar cart.
We'd be lucky if we're getting a $2 comic.
But like,
Yeah.
like it wouldn't be the round number. Like comics
Sure,
are
yeah,
not
yeah, yeah.
$5 or
Oh, yeah.
$4.99. You know,
It'd be $2.99 right now.
Yeah.
That's how
Drawing the
cheap
line
you
at
get it.
$0.99. Yeah, I get you. Yeah.
the first $4 comics, so the first 4 comics that were $1 from DC were the Superman Family, House of Mystery, World's Finest, and GI Combat, as announced by Mike Tiefenbacher in the Comic Reader 136 from October 1976. Tiefenbacher was the executive editor of the Comic Reader at the time, a freelance writer and a comics historian.
Tom Account says the first dollar comic he bought was World's Finest. So
There you go.
Whoa, that's awesome.
There you go. So this is what Tiefenbacher wrote. Beginning December, 4 titles, the Superman Family, House of Mystery, World's Finest, and GI Combat, will cost $1, will be 80-page giants. Before, right? Even that language. Before mathematicians start figuring out comparative costs with former 80-pagers, we will mention that these books will contain 66 pages of new material, roughly 4 times the material contained in a 30-cent book. What these books will resemble, for the most part, are Golden Age titles, i.e., they will return to multi-character books to the stands. So, Jeanette Khan hated reprints. She did not like the concept of reprints. She thought that reprints were bad. As I said earlier, she felt that the news stories were what people came to the table for, and that the reprints were just not worth doing. But
sense.
yeah, I mean, I completely agree. But she thought that the package that comics were presented in at the time just didn't work. So something had to change. This is the origin of the dollar comic. So this interview that I'm about to read from now is from Comic Media News number 29. And isn't it crazy how many different publications there are?
Before
just
Wizard
about
too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I did have one question before we get into that.
Yeah.
Comics, normal comics, they were 30 cents. You said. So
These-
like in my
yeah.
head, $1 comics like, oh, that's cheap, but these are oversized, almost thrice the amount of a normal comic.
Yes.
Okay.
And
The Jokers of their time. Got it.
yes. And they don't have reprints in them, which they normally would have.
Gotcha. Okay.
Normally, you would have gotten a book like this, and it would have been half
All old stories.
Yeah, half old stories, half new, something like that.
Cool.
So this is the quote from Jeanette. This is from January or February of 97, 97, Jesus. 20 years earlier, 77. Quote, the current package is absolutely untenable. 17 pages and reprints and a 30-cent cover price. There's no place to go, really. And yet, there was a time when you paid 10 cents for a comic book and 10 cents for a Time magazine. The trouble was that we didn't keep up with the rest of the industry in price rises. 20 years passed before we dared to make the great leap to 12 cents. Then we tried 15, then 20, then 25, and now 30 cents. But still, all that is too low. Time magazine is now $1. We should be $1. And that's where we're headed. It's a major experiment, but I think it's the answer, not just for us, but for Marvel, Archie, any comic book company. The dollar package is just like the Golden Age format in that we will be having 80 pages, 14 of ads, and 66 of all new material. It'll be a change for writers and artists to do stories of any length that seems appropriate to the story rather than cramming it into a meager 17 pages. It is going to give the wholesaler and retailer a chance to make money. The retailer, who for years has not wanted to carry comic books in his shop, saying, why should I? What does 50% off of 30% mean to anybody? All they do is clog up my newsstands and keep people from buying Playboy and all those other money-making magazines.
The audacity of hearing that versus hold the line at $3.99 or whatever.
$2.99, yeah.
And like we're paying $8 a pop now for 30 pages, maybe.
Yeah.
Oh,
Unreal.
the experiment just never ended.
Unreal. And what I'm struck by is that this is such an incredibly raw and honest interview.
Yeah.
We would
Yeah.
never hear a Marvel or DC employee speak that way now. That just wouldn't happen. No way. And it's amazing how far behind the industry already is in 77. The whole industry, forget DC. 30 cents versus $1 for Time magazine, right? And this is at a time, people don't necessarily like to admit this, but this is a major storyline that we're going to be dealing with, is the fall of the newsstand and the rise of the direct market. The newsstand industry was already turning away from comics because of exactly what Jeanette Khan points out. They're not worth the shelf space. It's the exact same thing that Dan Didio said. You can't go to an airport, which will probably be in an interview quote later, and put a 30-cent comic on there when airports sell books and magazines and things that the airport shop owner is making real money off of. What money is there to make off a 35-cent comic? It ain't there.
I've seen comics in an airport twice in my life.
Never.
And they were
I
kids.
never have.
They were kids comics. They were Archie books.
Right.
But that makes sense, right? You want to incentivize the retailer, and I think also you're offering a better product to an end consumer. It has more pages. It has something that like one of the big things we talk about is that value versus the page cost and whether it's even worth it. Like we struggle with that a lot of the time now, but at the very least that feels like value. I can sit there and read it, and it takes time.
Yeah, exactly. Comics felt cheap.
Mm-hmm.
They were literally cheap
Yeah.
to buy. And parents would buy them for their kids, like, hey, have this while I shop, or have this while I, get a haircut, or whatever, whatever. They weren't treated seriously enough by
Disposable.
themselves. They were treated as disposable. The paper quality was god awful. It's a big reason why comics from even earlier than that are so sought after, because the paper quality was so bad that if you actually have a pristine copy of Superman, Action Comics, #1, if you have those early books in such great condition, that's rare because no one does. I decided to look at the sales charts as far back as I could go on Comic-Con, and it took me to 1984. The
84?
first, sorry?
1984, you said?
Yeah, 1984. The first comic that I ever read, Secret Wars, was the #1 seller every month that year. But my heart sank when I did this because every issue of Secret Wars, except for the last one, which is issue 12, cost 75 cents. That's 7 years after DC was desperately trying to establish a dollar baseline. 7 years later, Marvel's big event, arguably the first legitimate crossover ever, was only 75 cents. That's awful. I'm going to shift over to an interview from Mike Gold, who at the time was DC's public relations representative. And he did an interview with Comic Media News #32. This came out in August. This was the August-September edition from 77. The reason why the dollar comic books are doing so well and why we're so optimistic about them is that they're more profitable comics for the retailer to have, so that a guy who doesn't handle 35 cent or even 60-cent comics, a guy who was in an airport or a shopping center, these types of places by and large do not handle comic books because the 6 to 8 cents they make off a 35-cent comic book is not worth the hassle. But on $1, they're making good money. They're making more than on a $1 copy of Time magazine, as a matter of fact. DC was giving them 50 cents on the dollar, and Time was giving them 40 cents on the dollar.
Half? Holy shit.
The way we have it set up, the book will be on the stand for 2 months. That's the promise we make to these people. I don't think we'll change it until we have a full line of dollar books, rather than just the 3 we have scheduled at the moment. It's such a beautiful system we have now. There's no reason to jeopardize. So, Superman Family was an absolute juggernaut. This book slayed. It came out and it did gangbusters. But core fans of comics, I guess like the modern, that era's version of us, people who are well invested, that know the things, and are into it. The little bit of older crowd, the college age crowd, and up, they hated Superman Family. Because Superman Family harkened back to a bit of an older time when the stories were a little bit brighter. The cover had everybody smiling. Jeanette Khan was able to get Neil Adams to come back. Neil Adams had left. He was unhappy with the prior management, and he came back and was doing covers again. And so things were going great. And Superman Family was leading the charge. I'm going to read a quote again from Mike Gold. The first Superman Family dollar book. I know the fans didn't like it, and I'm not going to apologize for that. The younger readers really did like it. The book was probably the most profitable in terms of bucks. Comic book to be published in maybe 5 years by anybody. It sold phenomenally well, selling at about 140,000 copies per issue. That's a real rough estimate off the top of my head, but every point above break, even on a dollar book, is 3 times more profitable than a point on a 35-cent book. And the book came in at about 12 points above break even. That's phenomenal. That's terrific. Here's why. Superman Family sold 140,000 copies per issue in 1977. In 2019, that's the last year during which comic sales figures were released publicly, no ongoing book has sold 100,000 copies or better every month. The one event series that did that was House and Powers of X, which double shipped in September and August, each issue selling over 100K.
Whoa.
Not even Batman. Not even Batman. That's the entire year of 2019.
Wait, the entirety, not a single issue of any of them had sold over that 100K?
Every month.
Within their respective month.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like every time it came out, it sold 100K.
Sure. Okay.
That's absurd.
It's the numbers, baby. They're scary. They don't look good. They haven't for a while.
But what's so funny to me is that the best-selling book that DC had that was selling so much was something that fans didn't like. Core audiences didn't like.
Or older fans didn't like.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. I think that's worth pointing out. And so,
and sorry,
go ahead.
To sort of go off of that, it's the same thing we're having, the same issue we're having with like Captain Underpants or Dogman or whatever the fuck. Like older fans aren't going to go for that, but you sure as shit put that in front of a kid and they're going to eat it up.
And to that point, and I'm gonna post this into Discord. I was walking the city yesterday, and I found the theater where they're premiering the Cat Kid, which is a Dave Pilkey creation that is adapted for theater. I'm gonna put it in the general chat for anybody who's interested.
It's pretty cool. So at this time, Marvel is doing great. Marvel was appealing to older people, college-age people, the more entrenched comic book fan. But they were also appealing to something else. They were appealing to the direct market. The direct market was founded in the 1970s by Phil Seuling. It was initially created by him to allow retailers to bypass distributors and make purchases directly from publishers. So if you don't know what the direct market is, this is the time to lean in. Its success is predicated on the concept of no returnability. Stores that purchase comics do so without the ability to return them if they don't sell, removing the burden of returned comics from the publishers. Traditional comics carriers like newsstands operated on a sell or return system, often causing comics publishers to lose money and be stuck with comics they have no means of selling. That's what we talked about before with DC's sell-through rate of 50% to Marvel's 70%. So even when returnability was a thing amongst the non-direct market retailers of comics, Marvel was kicking their ass. But when you get into the direct market, sorry?
More use of red.
Yeah, it was certainly the red. And Star Wars, it's worth pointing out, as Atomic Hound did in the chat, Star Wars comics were also awesome. The direct market allows for more risk on the part of publishers and allowed for the formation of new publishers at the time because comic shops are directly targeting their audience, and comics have virtually no competition within that space, while on newsstands they were competing with magazines. The direct market also made the culture of collecting back issues, thus allowing people to get caught up on series they would otherwise never be able to, possible. And it was created in response to the declining interest in comics at the newsstands.
Was it successful? Then it was successful in revitalizing that, yeah. Because if you're gonna have a consolidated space for the thing that you want, both on a from like a consumer and producer end. Oh, but then you box yourself. Interesting. Okay, wait, keep going.
No, what you're doing is what happened. That's history, dude. That's the history of comics. And spoilers, but we will definitely do one of these on the direct market because I'm fascinated by it.
Yo, yeah.
But saying it plainly now, the direct market, in my opinion, saved comic books. Did it doom it later? We'll talk about it.
Yeah. I feel like we're in the same situation now, except not it's direct market and digital. But
ooh,
dang! Look at these analogs.
Ooh. So Marvel was playing more to the direct market. Marvel understood that this was a place where their audience already was. Why bother playing the newsstand game when you could play the direct market game? They were flooding the market, publishing a ton of books, and they were publishing books that they felt would hit their exact core audience. And in fact, jumping ahead to 81, Marvel had actually tried, I believe this was the first example of this, at least from the big two, to play directly to the direct market by publishing a Dazzler comic, which would not have succeeded on the newsstand because Dazzler. Go ahead, Tyler.
This is the one I think that also came with a record or some kind of music with it. I have it.
You have it?
I have the Dazzler comic somewhere. I have multiple Dazzler books. Little known fact.
Oh, wow.
Big Dazzler fan. I have 4 Dazzler action figures too. I love Dazzler.
Is this similar to like Daphne Byrne being the book that saves comics? Like
that was a joke. So this is the truth of it.
Okay.
Jim Shooter tried with this Dazzler book by making it the first ongoing series exclusive to the direct market, and meaning that it only sold to comic shops. and it did crazy good. 400,000 copies sold to stores. That was double the best-selling books that they had at the time. So that's just to give you an idea of what Marvel was doing at the time. DC was still years behind of finding that kind of success in the direct market.
Yeah, it looks like this was originally supposed to be published in like a super special series, but then they flopped. Yeah, I do have this. Yeah, it was
That's
after
cool.
her first appearance in Uncanny. I think she fights Galactus in this series. Yeah,
Sounds like some Squirrel Girl shit.
very much so. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's shift back to DC because DC is winning. Not the war. They're losing the war. But they're getting better. Things are getting better. Dollar comics are really working. And so let's take a look at DC's publishing line. I was fascinated by this. So I'm looking at an image that features what DC's publishing line looked like in early 97 as we transition out of 96.
77.
So Jesus Christ. 77, thank you.
True 90s kid.
It's a long list. If you guys will indulge me, I'm going to go through it all because I think it's important.
Yes.
Action Comics, which featured Superman, backups called The Private Life of Clark Kent and The Sporting Life of Steve Lombard. I don't even know who Steve Lombard is.
What?
That feels like current action with the backups on it, and one of them is a younger Clark Kent with young Jonathan. Yeah.
Oh, true.
If I'm not mistaken, Steve Lombard, and Hound and Dan will correct me in the chat. I know Steve Lombard was a rival, I think, for Lois Lane.
Yeah.
And he was like a co-anchor of the Daily Planet's news stuff. So he would have been the Gary Oak to Clark Kent's Ash Ketchum.
That's hilarious.
Oh, he was
great backup character.
sportscaster to bounce off of Clark Kent's news reporter.
Wasn't he kind of a dick? Am I remembering that correctly?
If he's Gary Oak, then
yeah, true. Yep.
Yeah.
Adventure Comics, which starred Aquaman with Manhunter from Mars as backup feature.
Ooh.
All-Star Comics starring the Justice Society of America. Batman Family, which was a 50-cent giant starring Robin, Batgirl, and Man-Bat. Batman Family was a crazy success as well.
Man-Bat?
Yeah, Man-Bat. I don't know if it's that Man-Bat, though. I'm assuming it is, but I just wouldn't have the context. Black Lightning, The Brave and the Bold, with Batman team-ups with assorted DC heroes. DC Special, which was a 50-cent anthology title that had various people in it. DC Superstars, which was a similar concept, but it was a genre anthology, not a superhero anthology. Detective Comics, of course, which was a Batman book. The Flash, Freedom Fighters, Ghosts, Supernatural short stories. GI Combat, which was the dollar book we talked about. Green Lantern, starring the Green Lantern, Green Arrow, and Black Canary. Okay. Hercules Unbound, House of Mystery, which was the dollar book we discussed. House of Secrets, which was a supernatural short stories anthology. Isis, Jonah Hex, Justice League, Kamandi, The Last Boy on Earth, Karate Kid, Metal Men, New Gods, Our Fighting Forces, starring with backup features starring individual squad members. Plastic Man, Rag Man, Richard Dragon, Kung Fu Fighter, Secret Society of Supervillains, Secrets of the Haunted House, Sergeant Rock, Shade the Changing Man, Shazam, Starfire, Superboy, starring the Legion of Superheroes, Super Friends, Superman, Superman Family, which again was that heavy hitter, which had Supergirl, Jimmy Olsen, Lois Lane, Crypto, Nightwing, and Flamebird in it.
Damn.
But that's not the Nightwing.
No,
that's
those
not
are the
Dick Grayson.
Kryptonian superheroes. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Superman or Super Team Family, which was a 50-cent giant that featured the Challengers of the Unknown and the Doom Patrol reprints. Teen Titans, Unexpected, which was supernatural stories, Unknown Soldier, Warlord, Weird War Tales, Weird Western Tales, Welcome Back, Cotter, which was one of laughing at that, which
That's
was one
great.
of several DC TV books, which was an initiative that Jeanette Khan tried before Dollar Comics that actually failed.
What artist was drawing John Travolta in that?
Yeah, they started with Welcome Back, Cotter. I can't imagine why that failed.
But yeah,
Huge show though.
Sure.
burned out, but yeah. Witching Hour, which was supernatural short stories, Wonder Woman, World's Finest Comics, which was the dollar book that featured Superman, Batman, Green Arrow, Black Canary, the Vigilante, and Wonder Woman, and Young Love.
Comics, I wish I was alive in the 70s. That's incredible.
Honestly,
From Ragman ongoing, fuck.
That's
Yeah.
wild.
Warlord
They had
ongoing.
Shade over there earlier.
Yeah.
Just quickly, the Green Lantern book you mentioned that was co-starred Green Arrow, Black Canary, that would have been the Hard Traveling Heroes
Yep.
arc,
Oh,
which is where the drug issue happens with Speedy, but is a seminal it's Neil Adams, Denny O'Neil.
well, goddamn, Kale, I'm glad you're here, dude.
As you're saying all this, I'm actually really surprised at how much I already know.
Dude, a lot of these books were good in in retrospect. We can look back at these and like, oh, these are like seminal runs for a lot of these things.
Comic Boom says, I have high grade Superman family comics, hard to find in 9.8. That is so cool.
What?
Hell yeah.
If you would be so kind as to take a picture, if you have like physical access, and send it our way, I would love that. I would love that. That's really cool. Now, if you zoned out as I was listing all those books, or you felt you needed to skip ahead, that's okay. I understand. I have the breakdown for you. So 4 of the titles explicitly included the word war. 8 of the books are about war or soldiers that don't include the word war in their title. 8 of the books are supernatural or horror books. One of them is a supernatural war crossover book. There's 2 karate books, like martial art books, and 24 superhero comics. So a much more diverse line. And you even had Young Love, which, was, to my knowledge, a very popular book.
Probably would have been the dying embers of romance in mainstream comics anyway.
And the interesting thing is that, you can see this just if you look at the list of books that I said. DC has said, okay, well, maybe romance books as like a genre unto itself is going the way of the dodo, but we can infuse romance into our superhero books.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah.
I wonder if that's where you get like the long-haired Clark Kent, Fabio covers, hair blowing in the wind with his cape, and the Lois with her blouse open, draped over him.
Yeah, I think so. And one of the draws, I hope I'm remembering this correctly, but one of the draws was, again, the fact that they had those incredible covers. You had covers from Ramita at the time, and Neil Adams, I believe. He brought a lot of people's interest to these books. So yeah, incredibly diverse publishing line, and it would get more diverse because, emboldened by the success of the Dollar Comics initiative, Jeanette Khan and her team decided to gamble again, this time with a line-wide change that would see the page count and price of their non-Dollar Comics rise. DC also had an ace in the hole by the name of Superman the movie.
Ooh, hello.
Slated for release in June of 1978, it would launch right in time for Superman's 50th anniversary and reinvigorate people's love for comics, saving DC.
Wow.
What,
What a
Jeanette?
nice, what a nice ending to this story.
Yeah,
All
that's
right, let's
crazy.
get on with the news.
Yeah, that was awesome. Sean, I thank you for taking us on this journey. It was a lot of fun.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. What Jeanette, Paul Levitz, and the rest didn't know is that not even Superman could save them from their fate, which was well sealed by June of 78, because winter was coming. A bitter, brutal winter that brought the blizzard of 77.
Oh no.
And that is where we will end the first part of the history of the DC Comics Implosion.
But then you gotta make it a little dramatic, and then the camera pans out, and who is there standing amidst the snow? Mr.
Stanley.
Freeze. Oh,
Oh,
No.
So we'll do this every week until we're done. Probably about 3 more weeks of this.
This would have been. Now I'm thinking about it. I'm trying to relate to Marco here and get into Marco's mindset. This initiative would have been where Swamp Thing first appeared, right?
no,
No.
Swamp Thing's from the 40s, isn't he?
no, 72, 71.
So House of. Okay. So not this House of Secrets. Okay.
Yeah. House of Secret 92.
I did find my first Dazzler though. So
Oh, that's so cool.
Yo.
Oh yeah.
great cover.
Yeah, I have the one where Magneto's like cuffed. One of the early trials.
Hucked.
Cuffed.
I bet.
Hell.
So where are you guys at? How did you feel about that? Are you on the hook? What are you thinking?
Yeah, this rules.
What I feel about this is that like once you listed all the titles, like I miss those genre books. You know.
Yeah.
Like even on the cover I have for the DC Explosion, I have the image up. Like it's Superman, it's Black Canary, it's Wonder Woman, it's Batman. But then behind him is Jonah Hex, I think Cain or Abel from the House books,
Both of them
and
were-
Sergeant Rock.
what-
Like
Yeah.
they're on the same tier as Superman and Batman, which is bonkers to me. Because you're lucky
Well-
to get a cameo from these guys in any book.
House of Secrets and House of Mystery were both like pretty well known,
Yeah.
like and popular horror anthology titles. And yeah, you got a lot of characters come out of that. So like
But
that
just-
that.
The Big
to
Two
your
just doesn't
point-
do that anymore, you know. Like
Right.
Yeah,
Like,
we have to
have
get
that
our silver
anthology.
coins, our swan songs, you know.
And those have been doing really well, which is interesting as to like why, some publishers haven't gotten or aren't taking that opportunity to be like, oh, this is something that's working. Like the DC horror line initiative they did like a year or two that they started, like that's been really successful. I think the books have all been quality. Whether or not they continue, that I think you need to focus your things. It becomes very genre specific, which feels reminiscent to the way that manga segments their stuff now. Like,
Yeah.
you're
I just feel
doing it
that
by
the genre
category.
stuff is less farmable.
But it's
So-
categorical.
Sure.
It can become that, I think.
Dan Trudeau has the answer. As typical, he is Dan the true Trudeau.
It's the
As
truth,
always.
man.
Those books sold on the newsstand, but not the direct market. And that's the problem. So, as the direct market became more vital, they were able to target their core audience more, and their core audience wanted more superhero comics. So they stopped diversifying and they cut the line more and more. And you're going to hear why. The explosion implosion is a major reason why. When I tell you what DC's publishing line was like in 78 versus 77, you'll understand.
So curious.
This is a pivotal time. I'm surprised people don't talk about this more. This is an incredibly exciting time in comics, and it really shaped the next decade and, frankly, the decades to come. This is where it all started. I mean, I'm sure it didn't. Eventually, I'll look at the 60s, and I'll say the same shit, right? But this is, a lot of the stuff that we think about and talk about today was happening then.
And Sean, you and I are Marvel heads. I think
Yeah.
proclaimed.
Mark.
So this is news to me. Like I mean I've known about it tangentially just from like my knowledge of Marvel. This kind of going on in the background, but like, yeah, this is fun stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, awesome. So we'll be back with that next week. We're not done. The show's not done, but we will do the next
Casey, bye.
presentation next week.